Hello and welcome to Picture a Better Tomorrow, brought to you by Kanawha County Schools, Suddenlink Communications, and the United Way of Central West Virginia. Well, here we are in the middle of April. We're just about a week or so past Easter, so I hope everybody had a great holiday. And I'm joined today by a very, very special good friend of both the state of West Virginia and every citizen that calls themselves a West Virginian. We're joined by Major General James Hoyer, who is the Adjutant General for the state of West Virginia. General, I'm going to just call you General if that's okay. We're glad to have you.
Well, thanks for having me, John.
We're going to talk a lot about the flood today. But before we do, tell the viewers just a little bit about Jim Hoyer and what your military history looks like.
So I'm born and raised West Virginian, grew up just at the edge of Charleston in a little place called Knollwood. Great neighborhood to grow up. Have been in the military since 1981, so 36 years. My wife and I have two sons in the National Guard. Our oldest is actually in the middle of the FBI Academy right now, the youngest finishing college and just have returned from deployment. And I grew up, started out as a Cav officer, but always wanted to be in Special Forces. I spent about 16 years in the Special Forces community here in the National Guard, then moved on to build some new capabilities in counter-narcotics and homeland defense and weapons of mass destruction response capability that we now have in West Virginia, and have had the privilege of being the Adjutant General for just over 6 years now, since February of 11, and am excited to every day to represent the men and women of the West Virginia National Guard who do just great work for West Virginia and for our nation.
So the National Guard's made up of military personnel. There's some there's some civilian folks. Any other components of the Guard?
So we have both Army and Air. So we have two air wings, Martinsburg and Charleston, and then we have Army units spread across 35 locations across the state, and they range from military police to engineers to special forces, and some specialized units that we have in West Virginia that do a National Capital Protection mission, which is a pretty big deal for us. And again, we are shaped by the people that we have in our organization. We've been fortunate since 1996 to have tuition reimbursement from technical trade skills through a master's degree. I've got two folks in medical school right now, and that capability that was given to us over the years has allowed us to grow just an excellent organization that these men and women and their families sacrifice a lot for our state and for our nation, and they're dedicated. Our history as a Guard actually goes back as a military organization before we were a state. We trace our roots back to a militia company that was formed in 1735 by Morgan, and in 1755 they served with then Major George Washington in the French and Indian War, and in 1775 when Washington was tasked to form the Continental Army, he called for that militia company and a sister company out of Winchester to come forward to help form the Continental Army. So we have a unit, the 201st Field Artillery West Virginia National Guard, that has a battle streamer from 1775.
Wow.
So I tell folks in Washington and at the Pentagon, the West Virginia National Guard was doing the nation's business even before we were a state.
Used to hear Governor Manchin talk all about how we give and give and give as a state. That's a great example. Never have known a military man that didn't have a whole lot of military history in the back of their mind about how it works. So everybody has a boss. Who's your boss?
My boss is Governor Jim Justice.
So he's been your boss for a short period of time. You had a previous boss.
Yes, Governor Earl Ray Tomlin was. I'm a unique circumstance. I was actually nominated for the position by Governor Joe Manchin, who then became Senator Manchin, as the transition occurred, was actually officially appointed by Earl Ray Tomlin, and now been appointed again by Governor Justice.
So there's no question, based on your predecessor, General Tackett, and now your tenure as Adjutant General, that you guys know exactly what you're doing because you've been able to survive multiple administrations, and that's a really good thing.
I think, yeah. Well, I think the good news is that the people of West Virginia value the Guard enough that we keep the politics out of the National Guard, and we focus on what's right for the state and the nation.
So June 23rd, 2016 rolls around, and all of a sudden we have a flood. And I've heard you talk about Afghanistan and the military, and here you are in your fatigues and weapons of mass destruction. And how did the Guard get connected and start to address the whole flood response situation?
So the Guard, by Constitution, by U.S. Constitution, is a multi-mission force. You know, we are the militia that's actually annotated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And we've evolved from that construct, but we have a dual mission. Our mission is to be prepared to provide forces in support of the nation's overseas requirements as directed by the President of the United States, and we have a mission to maintain the security and safety of the citizens of West Virginia. So it's the governor's responsibility as Commander-in-Chief and mine as his senior military advisor to make sure that we're ready to do both of those. And in the state of West Virginia, just because of the nature of our makeup being a small state, very small reserve component footprint, no full-time military base, the Guard becomes even more important from that standpoint. But historically in West Virginia, because of the nature of who we are in small rural counties, and they don't have the ability to put a lot of resources into emergency management and flood recovery, we become the heavy lifter to help that piece. So, and I've been fortunate since I've been a young captain in the early 1990s to work with a guy, Jimmy Jeanette, from Homeland Security and Emergency Management. We've been through 19 major FEMA declared disasters together. So we know how each other thinks, and Jimmy has crossed those administrations as well. So we've got really strong integration between emergency management and the Guard. So much so that over the next couple of months, we'll be combining the state's Emergency Operations Center that's run by Homeland Security and Emergency Management with the National Guard's Joint Operations Center to better improve our efficiency and reduce overhead costs.
Wow, that's great. That's great. Good move with the current budget situation that
Absolutely.
we're faced with. we can save nickels. That's a good thing. So, what kind of response did the Guard have on June 23rd or June 24th or June 25th? What kinds of things were we doing?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've also, I think, as a state, done pretty well with over the last several major disasters is Governor Tomlin and now Governor Justice have given us, Jimmy and I, the authority to pre-position forces in anticipation of potential events. So you invest a little bit of money, you put people in place, you're ready to go. You hope that if somebody complains that you wasted money because you didn't have to respond, but it's never a waste of money when you're prepared. So our folks were anticipating weather challenges and had some folks prepared, but as you know, what Weather Service and others anticipated was coming was even more dire and devastating. So fortunately, we had some forces prepared. We had, in the very beginning, it was the rescue mission, and it was Guard forces, law enforcement folks from the county, the state police, a tremendous number of first responders, emergency medical folks, fire departments, many of whom are volunteer, out doing those rescue missions and getting folks to safety. And stories of rescuers in boats, sitting in a boat holding onto the gutter of a house to rescue somebody out of a third story. A tremendous number of rescues went on. It resulted in us having minimized the number of unfortunate tragedy that we did have with the 23 West Virginians that lost their lives. It could have been greater. Jimmy and I talk on a regular basis how we were blessed with the fact that this didn't happen during a school year. Had we had the level of devastation we had at the schools that we had, I'm not sure that we could have quickly reacted enough to that we wouldn't have had even greater loss of life. So there's some silver lining that came out of that. Then you get into the next phase, which is stabilization, and that's making sure that people have places to stay, they have food to eat, they have water, that you're starting to work through all those individual issues that take place. And that's where the integration with all of our service volunteer organizations come into play. United Way, the churches, all those folks to help us get that level of stability for citizens and families. And now we're into recovery phase, and this is a recovery phase that we have not seen in this state in my recent history. We had devastation in the '85 flood, but it was more spread, and I just didn't sense the level of challenges where we had places where they were already economically challenged. If you look at the statistics, in most cases, the places that were hit by this flood, more than 35% of the folks were over the age of 62, and more than 35% of the folks were at a income level of moderate or below, primarily in some of those lower income pieces. So it becomes an even greater challenge for us in recovery.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you see in, especially the really hard-hit counties, Greenbrier, Kanawha, Clay on a per capita basis, and even some of the smaller ones like Nicholas and Lincoln and Jackson and Webster and places like that. That the housing that was damaged wasn't the typical 2.5-story brick home that you see a lot of these days throughout West Virginia. So that's a significant challenge right there. So as you drive around the different flood areas, you see a lot of military equipment. So you were able to deploy that equipment and the guardsmen out early into the process, and they continue to work day after day after day in all of the affected counties, I would presume.
Yes, and we actually still to today, 10 months later, we have National Guardsmen on state active duty still managing flood recovery. So a lot of those vehicles, as you get post-flood waters receding, are the engineer assets and the health and welfare assets and everything from making sure providers and first responders get around, and just in this particular case, just managing tetanus shots to make sure you don't create an even bigger medical and health dilemma by making sure that people who are in there and cleaning out homes. Then you've got just the massive amount of debris that comes out of homes that has to be stacked up and then picked up and moved to an appropriate certified landfill so that we don't create an environmental issue by moving asbestos tiles removed from homes to places that don't have the proper environmental protection. So it looks, I guess in some sense for folks, it looks relatively seamless and easy, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and just the management of, in our case, 839 guardsmen at the height of this for a couple of months. Sustaining 839 people is a military mission unto itself.
Sure, I understand. So General, the second half of our show is always a success story. So I'd like to ask you to stick around after a short break. We're going to talk about the recovery and the successes that we're seeing now